Today, we begin a new series on Tanium certifications. Welcome back to Tanium Tech Talks. I'm your host, Ashley McGlone, and welcome to this new Tanium certification series. When I was at Converge last year, someone asked me, hey, why don't you do a show on each one of the exams to help me prepare? So that's exactly what we've done. So today's show is going to give you an overview of the Tanium certification program, the steps to register, get trained, and sit your exams. And then you'll find a coming episode focusing specifically on each exam. Now, in typical Tech Talk fashion, I've invited insider experts to give you a backstage pass in this series. And are you ready for this? Each show will feature someone who helped write the exam, right? What better way to prepare than talking to someone that helped write the exam? Now, we're obviously not going to give you the exam questions, but we're going to tell you what to study and why. So if you've taken an exam at Converge, it's very possible you may have already met today's guest. Help me welcome Manon for her first time on the show. Manon, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Ashley, for having me. My name is Manon Latta, and I am the Director of Certification Operations here at Tanium. And basically, my team is responsible for the design, the development, the implementation of all components for our certification program, to include the candidate experience, which is what we're going to kind of delve into a little deeper today.
So this first episode is covering the whole certification exam experience as a whole, and I think you had a little bit something to do with that. What was your role in creating the certification program?
I, along with Stephanie Coburn, who is our VP of Enablement, we worked in the training industry for many years and saw how kind of some of the other vendors were doing it, and we learned some best practices and brought them here to Tanium. And so, over 3.5 years ago, we had our first exam launch, which was the Tanium Certified Operator in May of 2021. Soon after, we had the admin exam launch, and then here we are 3+ years later, and we just had on July 16th our 5th exam launch. That was the Tanium Certified Professional Endpoint Risk and Security exam. So, I mean, we're growing.
Well, congratulations to you and the team. I know it takes a large team to pull this off, putting it together all the certifications. And for those watching, it's more than just creating the questions. There's a lot that goes into creating a certification program and the exam. So, Manon and your team, we want to thank you for doing that. And we recognize your experience that you've brought from the industry because it really is a good program. I think I would like to think most people watching this show have taken an exam for some other vendor as well. I know I've done my share over the years, and my experience has been very positive with all the resources and everything to help get ready. So that's probably where it'd be a good place to start. Is where do people start when they want to pursue a certification with Tanium?
Sure. And the best place to start is going to be on, our website, tanium.com/learning/certifications. And, you're going to get right to this schedule exam now. Obviously, we're not going to do that right this second because we need to, figure out more about the certifications before we do that step. It's going to give you some ideas of some of the benefits of the certifications. And most importantly, it's going to give you a list of all the various certification offerings that we do have. Again, we're at 5 right now, and we're going to stay that way for a bit and just maintain the ones that we have. As with everything with Tanium starts with the Tanium Certified Operator exam. So we're going to look at the exam guide here. Just take a quick peek into that. And these are available for each and every exam. It's just going to give you a high level on what the exam is about, give you the total number of score points, the minutes. It's going to give you an idea of the candidate profile, and what that is a representation of the skills, abilities, prior experience that a likely candidate for this exam would have prior to sitting for it. It's going to give you our recommended learning path for each of the exams. Yes, for this TCO, obviously it's getting started with Tanium and the Tanium Essentials course. And then most importantly, it's going to give us the exam blueprint. So it's going to give us all the different sections that are going to be on the exam. And under each of those sections, it's going to have the objectives for, what we're assessing in those sections. And then it'll have the percentage that each of those sections is accounts for on the exam. So in this example, asking questions, 22% of the exam will cover content on asking questions, and will come from those objectives below it.
So if you're watching the show right now and you're thinking, why aren't you going into the details? Because we've got a show on each one of these exams coming up where we will go through this exam guide in detail. And man, I'm wondering, I've heard that there's another guide that will take me through kind of the larger exam registration process. Is that right?
Absolutely, Ashley. So as you go further down here, we're going to give you kind of, what your high level journey is here. And the very first thing that we'd want you to do is, aside from looking at the blueprint for TCO and making sure you're, prepared for that, is this handbook. And it's just basically a high level kind of start to finish rules and regulations of our program. It's going to give you an idea of, exam prep resources. It's going to provide, all of the fee information for each of the exams. And it's going to provide information on scheduling the exam, the different delivery methods that are available, whether you want to go to a test center, whether you would like to do the, OnView online proctoring. And then it's going to give you some information about, post-exam. You've taken the exam, you have your results now. What happens after that? Our retake policy goes into additional detail on that. Recertification policy, that's a big question we get a lot. All right, so I have something coming up for renewal. How do I renew that again? Is it just retaking that exam, or can a higher exam renew that for me? And then of course, the digital badging. So, once you've gone through the whole process and you have a successful outcome, sharing that information out to your network and letting them, celebrate with you on your achievements.
Well, this is a comprehensive guide. I see 5 pages there. Thank you. That's going to be a tremendous resource as folks prepare for just actually dipping their toe in the certification pond, so to speak. You got to get signed up, create an account, and then schedule. We'd love to walk through some of that with folks today. Can you show us what is it? Yeah, well, I guess let's finish your resources here, and then I'm eager to see what the registration process looks like.
Quickly touch on again the candidate handbook, again the Tanium Resource Center. We'll get into that more as we get into our candidate portal, and then just a Pearson VUE link out there as well, and then the all important FAQs, right? So just a quick guide here to some of the main ones that we always get. So going back up to the top here, like you said, so I've read everything. I said, okay, I'm ready to tackle TCO. So I'm going to go into the schedule now button there, and I'm going to hit this new candidate register button here. And it's going to bring up this registration form. A couple things I want to note on this form right here. So after first name, it has legal, and last name, it has legal as well. Please, please, please make sure that your name, as it appears on your, candidate registration here, matches a government ID that you have been issued, because you'll have to show this when you go to Pearson to take the exam. And so if you're Michael, but you typically go by Mike, please, please, please make sure that, Michael, you fill out Michael here, because you could run into problems on exam day. And that's really the last thing you need when you're, getting ready to go in and sit for an exam. That just will cause some extra angst that is not necessary. So making sure, again, legal names are on here and you have a government ID that matches that. On the email, we really do prefer that you use a corporate email if possible. I know people love to use, their personal ones just because those are less likely to change, but we really do prefer that you use your corporate email. If anything should happen and that needs to change, we can always do that. My team can always do that on the back end for you. So once you, finish filling out this form here and doing all of your, click to accept, you would hit register. You're going to get an email confirmation. You'll click the link to go back and set up a password. You're back here. And so we're going to go ahead and sign in. All right, so we are into our portal here, and I'm the certs candidate up here, so this is our sample profile. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my profile, and I'm going to go to my information, and I am going to update the company name here. So again, same as, we really want you to use your corporate email associated with your account. Please also make sure you do go in and fill out the company information and just hit update. And so we're going to go back just to the dashboard real quick and, just get familiar with some of the links out here. We've got links out to training, which you should, probably already be familiar with. And I do want to make a point here. While we highly, strongly recommend that you do take, the learning paths associated with each of the exams, that, is not really or may not really get you the whole way to passing the exam, because the exams are not meant to be a regurgitation of the training material, because that would just be a, post-course assessment. Certification really takes that one step further and is really focused on skill application. And so, we expect that you probably, take the training to gain some knowledge and then go back on the job, apply that knowledge, begin to build those skills, and then are able to, use that continuous learning to have a successful outcome on the exam.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because really the exams are about skills, proficiency. It's not just about remembering A, B, C, or D on multiple choice questions. There's some simulations in there that you have to really know your stuff. And so that's why we recommend in those guides we're going to review throughout the series, you'll see there's some hands-on experience that they recommend, as well as the training resources. It's really better together as far as helping you prepare.
And then as we go down here, we just have a little section here on news and updates. So anything important, updates from the program, you can see we have our announcement here about the new certification that we released. We have an announcement, about on-site exams and getting certified in Orlando. That is, coming up upon us in a couple months. So very excited for that. Again, we have, moving down to like important resources, the candidate handbook. Again, we think it's an important resource, so we have it in multiple places. Another one is the exam agreement. When you go in and sit down for each exam, prior to the exam starting, you have to click to accept the exam agreement. We only give you about 3 minutes or so to review that document, and it's quite a lengthy one. Just regarding the rules and responsibilities for certification holders. Things like you won't go take an exam and then run out and go tell your colleague, oh, these were the questions that I saw on it, and things like that. So we have that here, so candidates can really dig into that, review it at length prior to sitting for the exam. And then again, exam results. We talk about, people are always asking, well, what was my score? And we don't really give a score. It's, they're pass fail. So if you pass, you really don't get any further information other than that you did. If you fail, we do provide some additional section level performance information regarding the results. So candidates can use that to make improvements for their next attempt.
Yeah, you're covering a lot of my questions here already. This is great because that's a question that I've heard from some folks is, hey, I didn't pass. How do I know where can I study? So you're saying they'll get some type of a report at the end for over the whole sections, which sections in that exam guide they should go back and revisit.
Any candidate who is unsuccessful in their attempt will get some additional information on their score report. If you pass, you don't get anything other than you passed, but unsuccessful candidates will get some additional information on their score report, and it's going to be kind of a section level performance percentages. So again, this, example section 1, example section 2, those are all the sections of each exam. And so in this example, section 1 is weighted to be worth 22% of the total exam. And then this sample candidate here, their performance percentage for that section was 69%. So of all the questions relative to section 1, they got 69 of those, 69% of those correct, and on down. So, you can see section 2, they did not do very well on that section. So, they would look to whatever section 2 was, maybe dig a little deeper into some of the content there. Section 5, they got 100% of the questions correct relative to that section. So they're fine on section 5. So it just gives you candidates an idea of, their areas of improvement.
That is super helpful.
And then another important resource is the Tanium Resource Center. The customer service operations team did a phenomenal job on this. And this is not just for certification. This is for all things Tanium related. However, they did break down the blueprint for some of the exams and have this, kind of metro map. So you'll see the different sections of the exam here. And then underneath each one, they have links, videos, all sorts of documentation and things like that go along with the objectives under those sections.
These are great resources that really do, like you said, tie to each exam area. We've got all kinds of resources across everything from documentation, obviously, to videos like the Tech Talks or the other videos put out by our support center folks that you might subscribe to and see those every month. They try to release one of those videos, as well as some other purpose-built content to help you prepare for certification. There's lots of resources here to get started. So we're talking about registering for an exam. Why don't we talk for just a second about Converge? It's really popular to take exams at Converge, and flexible scheduling and the discount. There's a lot of reasons, a nice test environment. Plus we get to meet the certification team. So how do I sign up for an exam at Converge?
when you're registering for the event, Converge itself, there will be some add-on options that are available. So like labs is one of them. And then there will be add-on exam vouchers for whichever particular exam it is you're looking to take. And yeah, they are greatly discounted. It's $100 for all exams. And yeah, we have number of sessions throughout the week to be able to for people to kind of work into their schedule as needed around other schedules. Obviously we won't be available during keynotes and things like that, but Monday through Thursday we have all sorts of different hours. We have a lot of or not a lot, we have one morning, early morning hours. Some people are more on in the morning and before sessions even get started. We have a 6 a.m. that they can come on down. We'll load them up with some coffee and in they go to the exam. So
And what does the scheduling process look like? Because I'm thinking there's a traditional training center, typically maybe in my hometown, but how would I sign up for this like special event training center or testing center?
So over here on our in our portal here, we have this scheduling button. We're going to schedule an exam, and I'm going to say in person at a test center. And I'm going to, read that, yes, I need my photo ID and all that other kind of stuff, but we're just going to blow through that. But for this purpose, but people should be reading exactly that more in detail. I am going to say that I'm going to take this in English. And it's just going to ask me whether or not I attended any training or completed any training before this. And again, it's going to have some admission policy, reschedule policy, cancellation policy. Be sure candidates are reading this a little more closely than we are going through it right now. So it's going to bring up, based on wherever you're located, it'll bring up an address near you. We're going to put in Orlando here. And the very first thing that pops up is going to be our Converge site. So I'm going to select that one. I'm going to hit next. And then I'm going to see the only time it's available is during the week of Converge. So I need to go to that week, and you can see 18th through the 21st. And I am going to choose the 18th. And I am going to say, or it's telling me on Monday, the 18th, there's a 10 to 11:45. I'm going to go ahead and book this one. I'm just going to say proceed to checkout. Now, don't worry. It's going to say 225 for now. But when you add on a voucher at the Converge registration, they will kick off a notice to our team that you have purchased this, and we will provide you an email with a voucher number in it. That's where you would enter this code right here. Yep, you would just hit apply, and your confirmation is off to you and all of that, and we'd see you at in Orlando.
So while we're talking about exam delivery modes, so we've got the Converge experience. I know it's been a couple of years now. Like you said, over 3 years of certification. I remember early on, I took one at home. I kind of had to use my guest bedroom where there was not all this mess behind me in my office. You have to kind of make sure your area is kind of neat and tidy before you do that. But then also you can just go to a local testing exam center as well. So lots of options there.
And like you said, OnView, the online proctored it's a very convenient option, but there are so many rules and regulations that again, make sure you're reading about those prior to signing up to for that delivery method, because if you have a stray piece of paper that somebody spots on your desk, or they see a dog walk by in the background, or something very silly like that, I mean, the exam will shut down. So it's a very convenient option, but it's also a very highly susceptible to go wrong as well. So it's just making sure you're prepared, again, reading all of those requirements and making sure that you minimize any reason for anything to go wrong there.
Yeah, put a post-it note outside the door, communicate to all the family, do not
Yes,
open this door whatsoever while I'm taking this exam, right?
exactly.
There's some real stipulations there, but it's very convenient if a testing
It
center is not nearby.
it is. There is a new policy that Pearson has put in place that you must have if you are doing the OnView option delivery method, you must have a successful system check on your record prior to them even, putting you in the queue for having a proctor. And so I think they will force that, you know, before they even allow you, a proctor to come on and get you going. So if for some reason during that check, which I'm hoping that people aren't waiting until the day of the exam to do this, and they've, done plenty of checks prior, it will, something will pop up if you're having issues and it will say, do you want to reschedule? So I think maybe with OnView it might be a little more lenient just because of that system check that needs to be completed.
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that because for some people, if you've got a company issued laptop that might have security policies that inhibit some of the capabilities needed in the browser, something like that. So I know some people end up taking these exams from a personal laptop rather than a corporate laptop. So you do want to go in when you get that registration for the OnView online exam experience. You want to make sure you go test that from the laptop that you're going to be using for the
Yes.
exam on your home Wi-Fi or whatever, making sure that everything's going to work.
Not only the day before, I mean, do it like the day that you're even, scheduling and you're saying, this is the option I want to choose. Like, do it right after that and, make sure whatever you can do to minimize the, even the slightest, it's already an angsty day, with the word exam, taking an exam, and just whatever can be done to minimize any kind of unforeseen issue is more likely, to produce a successful outcome for our candidate.
And when you're scheduling, school's getting ready to start here any day. Maybe it's best to do it while the kids are at school, while people are out of the house, so it's quiet and you don't have to worry about those distractions. Because I know I've had plenty of sweaty palms and racing heartbeat clicking through those exams, especially when you hit done at the end. You're just on, even though you've prepared everything, sometimes there's some of those questions you're like, where did that come from? I thought I was ready. But so this is a fantastic opportunity, multiple ways to take the exams. So let's talk about like the exam experience itself. So I think all these exams are probably a mix of some multiple choice versus simulation. Can you talk about that for a second?
So yes, they are. Each exam has, you start out with your multiple choice section, and then you move on to a simulation section. So, it's obviously not a live lab environment. Screenshots of the console, if you will, and we say do this task, and you have to kind of point, on the screen to where it is that you would go to do this task. At the beginning of every tutorial or simulation section in the exam, there is a tutorial that is provided. So we give you about 6 minutes, I think, to get familiar with the kind of features, functionality, the look, all of that. That is prior to every exam. But I think, once you take TCO, I think you get the hang of it pretty well. But for those who who don't know what that kind of means. So we're going to provide a video for you to be able to share.
What we're going to do right now is we're going to actually splice in a couple minutes here for you in this video from the actual orientation video that we show every year at Converge for exam takers. So you want to watch this so you kind of know it going in, but it's going to explain to you how that simulation environment works and where you get points and where you don't get points clicking through that. So we're going to insert that video right here. Don't go anywhere, because on the other side of that, we've got more coming up as we wrap up our certification orientation.
Prior to the simulation portion of the exam, you will be presented with this same tutorial, but we're giving you a sneak peek now to get familiar with the functionality. At the beginning of each simulation, there's a screen that provides the scenario. This scenario is also available in a sidebar as you progress through the simulation. Click the Start button to begin. In the simulation, you're presented with a simulated Tanium interface. This is not a live functional environment. Points are earned for correct clicks. Points are not deducted for incorrect clicks, they're just not earned. Regardless of whether you click the correct place on the screen or not, each click advances you to the next screen, with no ability to go back to the previous screen. This is very important to remember, as the multiple choice portion of the exam does allow you to go backward. In this example, the task is to navigate to the Interact homepage using the Interact tile. You would click the Interact tile and it would progress to the next screen. If you clicked anywhere else, it would still progress to the next screen, you just wouldn't earn any points for that task. As you can see, the sidebar provides the task for the current screen, as well as a recap of the scenario at the bottom. Sometimes you might need to scroll to read all the sidebar content. You will complete most of the tasks with mouse clicks, but there might be times when you'll need to enter text using the keyboard. Spelling matters, but it's not case sensitive. In this example, there are a few acceptable answers that would earn points. There might be times when you're presented with a drop-down menu. Simply open the menu and click the appropriate selection. Sometimes you might be presented with a Continue button, which is not scored and simply advances you to the next screen. This is important. When you're in the middle of a simulation, never click the Next button in the exam interface. Clicking Next would advance you to the next simulation with no option to revert back. You would be unable to earn any additional points for the previous simulation where you clicked Next. This is another key distinction from the multiple choice section. Some fields autofill information when you click them, like this one. There may be a few multiple choice questions. Simply click the radio button next to the correct answer and submit. At the end of a simulation, there is a Simulation Complete screen. Then, and only then, should you click the Exam Interface's Next button, which advances you to the next simulation.
All right, so welcome back from that little clip. Man, and this has been so helpful. I'm thinking we've got a lot of resources out there to help people. We've got the FAQs you called out on the website, a couple other FAQs, just maybe to say them out loud here. I know people always wonder, what if I need to reschedule? If I fail, need to retake? What are some of those time windows that people need to be aware of?
You know, after you have an unsuccessful attempt, the retake policy is 7 days. So, 7 days from obviously the last time that you took the previous cancellation policy. I'm pretty sure it depends on, whether you're doing OnView or going to a test center. So I think test centers are more stringent than OnView. But I believe OnView is kind of like 48, or no, I'm sorry, not 48, 24 hours. And that like a test center would be more like 48 hours.
So over at help.tanium.com, as you can see here on the screen, there is a training and certifications button there. We're going to drill into that. Here we've got all kinds of resources to get you started. So there's the Tuning Tanium webinars that I mentioned earlier. That's from our support center. Fantastic. That content gets a lot of good reviews from people that watch it. We've got our certification operator study path. Those are those subway maps we looked at earlier. But if you keep scrolling down over here on the bottom left, you'll see training at Tanium. So there's a number of free and paid options. And if you click the course calendar, there is a calendar here that tells you what's coming up, regardless of where in the world you are. We've got different geographies that host these. Some of these are free, like Getting Started with Tanium, or Tanium Custom Content, for example. Other of them are paid. So you can look and see what options you've got to get some free training. And then if there are some other titles that perhaps are paid, you can talk to your Tanium account team about how to get registered for those also. So Manon, thank you for this tour of Tanium certification today. As we close up here, I know there's a lot of frequently asked questions out there for people to explore. Is there anything particularly that you hear the most? Like, what's the most frequently asked question that you get?
Do you have practice exams? And unfortunately, we just don't at this time. However, now that we're, kind of in this maintenance mode and not so focused on exam development right now, we are taking the time, to do that. And it's not going to be a practice exam per se, meaning like, you're not going to get graded on it or anything like that. It's going to be more like sample questions. So, for each of the areas on the blueprint, okay, section 1, asking questions. Here's an example of content, that you would likely see on the exams. We'll try to get like, 1 to 2 for each section on the exam.
So I've registered for my exam. I complete the exam. I passed, and then what else do I get after that? There's something we forgot to talk about, I think.
We did the Credly badging. So immediately after the candidate portal gets your results from Pearson, you will get auto issued a badge. It is going to come directly to your email, and it's really just click to accept, and then it's going out and sharing it out there on LinkedIn or wherever else you choose to share it, and then letting all the congrats come in, and we'll be our team does that, monitors that closely and make sure that we're celebrating with every achievement.
Well, man, it looks like we're out of time here. As we wrap up, anything else you want to leave our viewers with?
Just prepare, not just for the exam itself, although obviously that's very important, but again, just preparing, making sure you're reading all of the documentation, the handbook, the exam agreements, all of that, stuff, so that when exam day comes, you're prepared for anything. You're not going to walk in and have the wrong, name on your account, because you've read that your government ID has to match and all of that. Making sure that you do these, system checks if you're taking the OnView option well ahead of time. Do not sit down 15 minutes prior to the exam, your exam appointment, and do the system check for the very first time. And then if that goes wrong, you're going to be, completely flustered. And again, you're already in a high anxiety, frame of mind there. So just prepare is really the best. And again, that continuous learning, not just taking the training, but, taking that knowledge from the training, going back, using it, applying it on the job, building those skills. And, hands-on prep is best, as with all most things.
Yep. And it's also worth noting to our viewers that when you pass that exam, it's good for a specific amount of time. Is it 2 years for each exam?
It is. Each exam is valid for 2 years.
Fantastic. I know I've got to go. I got the email the other day that I need to reschedule for or schedule for my renewal of an exam or two. So I'm looking forward to getting that done here soon. All right, folks, there you go. That is our overview of the Tanium certification process as we launch this new series with the people that helped write and create this process. So now you've got what you need in the show notes below. Go ahead and look through that candidate handbook and look at the exam guides for each one. And then stay tuned. In this series, we're going to have another video on each one of those certifications to help you with an inside scoop on how to prepare. And I hope to see you at Converge this year. 2024, when we're recording this in November, Orlando is coming up. I'd love to meet you there and give you a high five after you pass your exam. Plus, you'll get to meet Manon and her team. They do a wonderful job helping you feel comfortable and ready for your exams there. So thank you for joining us, and stay tuned for the rest of our Tanium certification series. Until next time, go Tanium.